There is a profound silence when it comes to how a man expresses true love, not the idealized romantic kind, nor the performative love shown through grand gestures, but the love born from a genuine encounter with his own soul. This kind of love doesn't show up in movies or relationship guides. It reveals itself in the shadows, in inner conflicts, in the silent journey of one's own consciousness. A man who loves truly doesn't do it for recognition, but because he has learned to recognize himself. This video is an invitation to unveil what remains hidden, how masculine love manifests when rooted in authenticity, emotional courage, and the integration of inner forces. Prepare to see the invisible. If you believe that true love begins within you, write in the comments, "I choose to love with awareness." According to Carl Jung's analytical psychology, true love does not spring from a sense of lack, but from a profound process of individuation, the path by which a person becomes who they truly are, integrating all aspects of the psyche. For a man, this kind of love can only emerge authentically when he confronts his shadow, acknowledges his projections, and reconciles with his inner feminine, the anima archetype. What is often called love is actually the unconscious attempt to fill an inner void with another person. Jung shows us that as long as a man projects his anima onto his partner, expecting her to embody qualities he has not developed in himself, his love remains an illusion, unstable and burdened with unrealistic expectations. True love arises when a man recognizes that the feminine is not outside him, but within. This integration allows him to see the other with clarity, free from the distortion of projections. Moreover, by embracing his shadow, his fears, vulnerabilities, and repressed impulses, he becomes more whole and, consequently, more capable of offering a love that does not seek to dominate or save, but to share and build. For a man, the journey of love is inseparable from the journey of self-knowledge. Without this awareness, he will repeat inherited patterns, get lost in idealizations, and confuse attachment with love. From a very early age, a man is conditioned to look outside himself for what he does not understand or develop internally. Society presents idealized images of love, women, and relationships, molding in the male unconscious an unreal and even dangerous expectation that a partner will complete him, give his life meaning, or heal his own wounds. Carl Jung called this phenomenon projection, a psychic mechanism by which an individual attributes to another qualities that actually belong to his own unintegrated psyche. When a man encounters a woman who awakens strong emotions in him, what often happens is not true love but the activation of an internal image he has projected onto her. He isn't seeing who she really is, but a mirror of his unconscious needs, repressed desires, and neglected inner aspects. This projection may create an intense enchantment at first, but over time it becomes unsustainable. When the other's real self, her imperfections, limits, and complexities begins to surface, the enchantment dissolves, and the man often feels frustration, distance, or even resentment. This dynamic reveals a great trap. The man in love with his projection believes he is experiencing deep love, but is actually in a relationship with a part of himself he has yet to recognize. It's as if he looks at the woman and sees his salvation, his muse, his completion, but this expectation is unsustainable and unfair to both of them. When she fails to match the idealized image, she is rejected or blamed for the collapse of the feeling. The way out of this illusion is awareness. Jung teaches us that by recognizing our projections, we can withdraw them and begin a more authentic relationship. This requires courage and humility, looking inward, questioning our fantasies, and taking responsibility for our own feelings. Love born of projection is unstable, fragile, and conditional. It depends on the other meeting our internal expectations. Love that springs from seeing the other as they are, with their light and shadow, is deeper, real, and lasting. It doesn't demand perfection, only presence. It doesn't chase an ideal, but accepts reality. By recognizing the mechanism of projection, a man takes an important step toward emotional maturity. He begins to understand that the other is not there to fill his voids, but to share the journey. And in that sharing, love becomes possible, not as fantasy, but as a conscious choice. This process can be painful, for it unmasks deeply rooted illusions, yet it is also liberating. By ceasing to project, a man learns to love with greater clarity and authenticity. He sees the other with more humane eyes, and at the same time learns to view himself with more compassion. This is the foundation of true love, the meeting of two whole beings who neither annihilate nor merge, but walk side by side, honoring each other's individuality. For Jung, the shadow represents all aspects of the psyche that have been repressed, denied, or not consciously recognized. It is made up of impulses, fears, desires, and vulnerabilities that the ego refuses to accept. In men, this shadow often holds emotional content closely tied to vulnerability, and therefore to the capacity to love. From childhood, boys learn that feeling fear, sadness, or insecurity is a weakness. They build an emotional armor to protect against the outside world, but in doing so they distance themselves and from others. True love, however, demands that this armor be opened. To love consciously and deeply, a man must access what he most fears to show: his sensitivity, his pain, his need for authentic connection. He must encounter his emotional shadow, the part of himself he was taught to hide, and accept it as essential to his wholeness. Yet most men are never taught to recognize their emotions as tools of self-discovery. They are encouraged instead to repress, ridicule, or ignore them. This creates a painful internal conflict. The genuine desire to love and be loved collides with the fear of vulnerability, of judgment, rejection, or hurt. So many men choose to love in a superficial, safe, controlled way, never fully surrendering or risking themselves emotionally. This protects them from pain, but also prevents them from experiencing love in its fullness. By facing the shadow, a man learns that emotional pain is not weakness, but an invitation to depth. He realizes that denying vulnerability also denies the possibility of true love, and that his ability to sustain a mature relationship depends on his capacity to handle difficult emotions. Often, the fear of loving is rooted in old wounds, childhood traumas, abandonment, rejection, or humiliation. When unhealed, these traumas remain active in the unconscious, shaping behavior and sabotaging relationships. Bringing them into consciousness allows a man to reframe them and transform his way of loving. This is the work of shadow integration, looking inward honestly, acknowledging fragile parts, welcoming them, and letting them help build more genuine bonds. The shadow also houses aggressive, jealous, possessive, or manipulative tendencies, which, if unrecognized, can destroy the very relationship one seeks. Integrating the shadow doesn't justify toxic behavior, but illuminates its roots so it can be transformed. When a man takes responsibility for his shadows, he stops projecting them onto his partner, the world, or circumstances, and begins the path of authenticity. Loving with vulnerability isn't about unrestrained exposure, but about allowing oneself to be seen fully, with light and shadow. It's showing fear without begging for rescue, expressing pain without self-pity, and revealing love without demanding guarantees. This kind of love can be frightening because it offers no control, but it offers something far greater: real connection. The shadow is not the enemy of love, it is its condition. One only truly loves when one also loves one's own darkness, welcoming wounded parts and allowing them to take part in the encounter with another. That is the healing love born of the courage to be whole. At the heart of Jungian psychology lies the anima, the archetype of the inner feminine in a man. She is not a real woman, but an image in his unconscious that shapes his relationship with the feminine, both inside and outside himself. Disconnected from his anima, a man seeks externally what he cannot find within his own soul. That misalignment leads him to idealize women, to get lost in intense passions, and to feel frustration when reality fails to match his inner image. Integrating the anima is one of the deepest tasks of individuation. Jung taught that as a man matures and turns inward, he is called to acknowledge this feminine presence in his psyche: intuitive, sensitive, receptive, and creative. She is the bridge between the masculine ego and the deepest unconscious. Ignoring her leads to imbalance. Integrating her opens the door to a more conscious, compassionate love. Throughout life, a man meets different manifestations of his anima, often embodied by women who touch him deeply, stirring feelings he doesn't understand. Though these encounters appear external, they are internal invitations to transformation. When a man projects his anima onto a partner, he believes he has found the perfect woman, the one who understands, completes, and inspires him. But in truth, he is facing his own unconscious image reflected back at him. The real challenge is not finding an ideal woman, but realizing that this idealization springs from an inner place yet to develop. By making this inner shift, a man removes the symbolic burden from the other and begins to see her as she really is, a human being on her own journey, with light and shadow. This disillusionment is painful but essential. It allows love to move from fantasy to genuine encounter. The anima also guards emotions, empathy, and sensitivity, qualities that rigid, controlling masculinity teaches men to repress. Reconnecting with these inner dimensions unlocks new ways of relating, expressing, and loving. Feeling does not make a man weak but whole. Listening to his emotional world is not a threat, but a source of true strength. Contact with the anima also awakens creativity and spiritual impulse. Jung saw this energy as a mediator between the conscious mind and the unconscious, allowing a man to explore deeper layers of himself. By recognizing and honoring this inner presence, he becomes more able to love not only another, but life itself, with all its mysteries and imperfections. When integrated, the anima becomes an ally in building real bonds. She enables a man to approach a woman without projection, without expecting her to save or complete him. He learns to respect the other's otherness, to listen more deeply, and to welcome his feelings without fear. This new way of loving arises not from need, but from presence. It doesn't seek fusion, but communion. It takes time, silence, and courage to discover the anima. She does not reveal herself in haste or under pressure. She waits until a man is ready to look within with honesty. When that moment comes, everything changes. Love ceases to be a desperate search and becomes a natural expression of one's true self. Loving with awareness is, above all, the fruit of an inner journey. It's not only about choosing to love someone, but about having undergone a profound process of self-encounter. Carl Jung shows us that the capacity to truly love arises from individuation, the journey by which a person becomes a complete individual, integrating the opposites within their psyche. For a man, this means uniting reasoning and emotion, strength and vulnerability, his shadow and light, his internal masculine and feminine. Individuation is not a final destination, but an ongoing process. As a man progresses, he sheds social masks, inherited roles, and unconscious projections. He stops loving to please, to feel needed, or to avoid loneliness, and begins loving because he has something genuine to offer, his own wholeness. At that point, love stops being a survival strategy and becomes a state of presence, mutual sharing, and co-creation. A man who has traveled this path understands that to love is not to annihilate or control another, but to sustain one's own identity, even in the deepest bond. It's knowing how to listen without losing oneself, to welcome without suffocating, and to express without invading. He realizes that conscious love demands maturity, and that emotional maturity doesn't mean the absence of conflict, but the ability to navigate it with honesty and respect. This emotional awareness results from integrating the various aspects of the psyche, especially the shadow and the anima. It is this integration that gives a man the capacity to love without fear, dependence, or illusion. When a man becomes aware of his own complexity, he no longer expects another person to fill his voids. He cares for these spaces with responsibility and compassion, knowing that true love is not a cure for unhealed wounds. He cares for himself, and from that place, can care for another. The bond becomes a space for mutual growth, not rescue. The other ceases to be an emotional crutch and becomes a companion on the journey. Conscious love is also free of idealizations. A man who has walked the path of individuation does not love an ideal, but a real human being with flaws, fears, and contradictions. He does not demand perfection, only presence. He does not expect the other to meet every one of his expectations, but allows himself to be surprised by who they truly are. This openness to reality enables deeper, more resilient, and more honest bonds. Moreover, conscious love recognizes cycles, boundaries, and transformations. It understands that love is not static, that it changes, and that it requires care, listening, and continuous renewal. A conscious man knows that love can be light, but also requires effort, that it can be sweet, but also challenging, and that above all, it reflects his own relationship with himself. This kind of love is not learned from books, nor inherent one to complete him. He seeks someone with whom to share the wholeness he has built. Loving consciously is the pinnacle of the inner journey. It is not an end, but a new beginning. A love born not from the fear of being alone, but from the fullness of being oneself. A love that needs no eternal promises, because it renews itself in the truth of the present. A love whose roots run deep and whose wings soar free, To love truly is above all an act of inner courage. It is the conscious choice to face one's projections, dive into the shadow, integrate the inner feminine, and traverse the process of individuation with honesty. Our man who reaches this point does not love to complete himself, but because he recognizes himself as whole. His love is not born of fear, but of presence. It is not shaped by expectations, but by reality. He loves because he has found himself, and so his way of loving transforms, embraces, sustains, and liberates. This journey, as we have seen, is silent, profound, and often solitary, but it is also the richest and most rewarding journey a man can undertake. By becoming conscious of himself, he becomes capable of forging relationships that are more authentic, more humane, and more true. If this reflection resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to keep following content that sparks real transformation. And now click the video on your screen to deepen your inner journey even further. Remember, true love begins at the most intimate encounter of all, the encounter with your own soul.